everyone, welcome to our third workshop. I'm so excited to have you all here for this workshop. Our workshop's title is When is the Right Time to Switch Jobs? This is a really awesome topic because we've got an amazing guest speaker for you all tonight. And the reason why this is an awesome topic is because this is probably something you've faced or thought about in your work experience. Maybe it's been something that's been on your mind recently. Maybe it's something that's been on your mind in the past, but it's definitely something that's probably crossed your mind. When is the right time to switch jobs? This could be because your company culture is not valuing you, or maybe you've got a bad situation with your supervisor, or maybe you're just kind of bored. You don't feel like you've got any upward momentum, or for any other reason for why you might want to switch jobs. This is the workshop for you to give you insight as to when actually is the right time to switch jobs. How can you go about identifying when that right time is, and how can you put yourself in the best position so then you are properly leveraging the opportunity at hand. Now, one thing we know is that one of the best ways to go about raising your pay level and your title, your actual status within a company's level, is by switching jobs. It's just a fact. What we've observed in the data is that people are less likely to get promoted by staying at the same company year over year. They are much more likely to get promoted faster by switching jobs. In fact, some of the things we see quite often is people leaving a company, going to a different company, getting some experience, and then coming back at a much elevated role than somebody who stayed at that company that entire time. So it's something to definitely consider and think about, but it is not all about switching jobs, and it is really all about when is the right time to switch jobs, because there's sometimes moves that are diagonal moves, there's sometimes moves that are directly vertical moves, there are sometimes horizontal moves that you believe will help you move up vertically even faster, and sometimes the motivation isn't necessarily to move up faster or to make more money. Sometimes it's to get more balance with your life, or sometimes the motivation is to work on something that is more of a calling to you, something that you really are passionate about. It's not about the money anymore. It's okay, whatever your motivations are. This workshop will really shed light on when the right time is to switch jobs. Now, we're going to cover a few key things that you can do to prepare for your mentor relationship and for how to actually go about preparing for switching jobs. And obviously, we've got an amazing guest speaker for you all this evening. But I wanted to talk a little bit about work orientation. Work orientation, that's that measurement that we've leveraged to help match you with your mentor. And this is something that plays a big role into job changes, because we know that, one, your work orientation is fluid. Work orientation is how you view your work. So some people view the work as a job, some people view their work as a career, some people view their work as a calling. If you've logged into your Ambition and Motion dashboard, you'll see that triangle, you'll see where your dot is on the triangle. But it's fluid, meaning that your dot could have changed between January when you took the assessment and right now. And that's, by the way, completely okay. That's completely normal. But what we know is that what motivates you at work will absolutely determine how and when and why you will want to switch jobs. So back to what I was saying earlier, if you're job oriented, that's, by the way, completely okay. It means you're motivated by work-life balance. Your decision to change jobs might be because you're working 80 hours a week and you just can't keep doing it anymore. You got to be home with family. You got things in your life that you want to do more of, and your work is not allowing you to do that. So your motivation is not necessarily more money or a higher status. It could be, hey, I want to work 40 hours a week, or I want to work 30 hours a week, I want to work 20 hours a week. I want to do something that can pay me a little bit of money, allow me to get by, but ultimately allow me to relax and wind down a bit. And that's okay. If you're career oriented, that's where we see a lot of the stereotypical reasons for moving, because it helps you work up the corporate ladder. It helps you get promoted faster. It helps you get a higher pay raise. It helps you learn new skills. Moving jobs is definitely something that's advantageous for someone who's career oriented, because it allows you to try new things. But then the key is, how can you be strategic about that? Our guest speaker will help us with that this evening. And then the last part is your calling. So if you're calling oriented, you might want to switch jobs because you're working for this company and it's just not doing it for you. You're like, yeah, it's fine. The impact on the world that we're making is fine, but it's just not calling to your heart and the impact you want to make on the world. And we end up realizing to ourselves, shoot, we've only got a finite amount of days, years, hours on this earth. We might as well be spending it doing something that we're really passionate about, that's really, we feel like is making a positive difference. We can always get more money, but we cannot get more time. For us, if you're calling oriented, you might determine, you know what, I am switching because I want to be doing something that's meaningful to me. Then the key is, how can you be strategic and put your priorities on a pedestal to ensure that you are getting what you want out of it. Don't get sidetracked by the things that do not motivate you. It can be easy, let's say if you're calling oriented, to start looking for new jobs because you want to find something that you're more passionate about. And then maybe you get 3 different job offers and you end up making a decision based on the amount of money. That would be crazy, but it happens all the time because ultimately you're making this job switch because you wanted to do something you were more passionate about. Ultimately, if you get, let's say, 3 offers and you're calling oriented, the company, the entity, the organization that is the most impactful to you really should be the one that wins out. At the end of the day, sure, your quantitative metrics in terms of how much money you need to be making should be appeased, but after that, you should be looking at impact if that's something that motivates you. If you're job oriented, what's the type of role that's going to give you the most work-life balance? You might have 3 job offers. One is, asking you to work 50 hours a week. One is asking you to work on Saturdays and Sundays. And one says, you know what, hey, you're going to only work 35 hours a week. You're only going to do that over 3 days, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Thursdays through Sundays are yours. That might be the thing that you want. You might be, I'm cool with working extended hours on 3 days of the week to get a bunch of hours, make money, and then, the rest of it's essentially a weekend. That could be the way that you perceive work. Whatever it is, make sure that what motivates you, what is the most important factor, is the highest and the most highest thing on your pedestal of what is your decision-making process. So that is just the thing that I really want to stress when it comes to when is the right time to switch jobs, making sure that your priorities are aligned with where you want to go. Now, we're about halfway through the mentor program this spring. Hopefully you've met with your mentor. Hopefully you've already met with your mentor twice. I want you to make the most out of this program. Take advantage of it. Meet with your mentor as many times as you possibly can, and hopefully get yourself to where you want to be. Now, one thing that I really want to stress is that if you are not able to get in contact with your mentor, if you're having any issues, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We can answer any questions, comments, concerns, or issues you have with your mentor. Or if you've got kudos, if things are going great and amazing, send it to us. We love hearing those stories. I mean, the positive just makes us feel good that we're making a positive impact. It makes us feel really special that we've done something. So I know often, it's, as the term goes, if it bleeds, it leads. We only want to share the things that are negative in our world. Share the positive stuff. It makes us feel better about what we are doing. We love to hear it. So let's jump in. Now, the one thing that we've talked about in previous workshops that I really want to stress, and I stress it every single time, that is strategy, story, and state. Those are the 3 keys to success in this program. And I'll talk about them in reverse order. State is the most important thing. Physically, what is your state? Physically, where are you at? Physically, what is going on in your world? I don't care if you've had a horrible day, if you're stressed out, if your work is frustrating you. I mean, the whole point of this program is that hopefully we can get your work situation to a point where it's not frustrating you. But regardless of it, when you're going into a mentor meeting, what is your state saying about you? If you're coming in with a negative mentality, if you're coming in with a negative state, you're going to give off negative vibes. Then people are not going to want to help you or be around you. But on the flip side, if you get yourself into a positive state, if you're doing power poses every morning, if you're getting yourself up, moving, working around, and just getting yourself overall in a good feeling and a good mood, because your emotions, by the way, your emotions drive your emotions. You can get yourself into an emotionally positive state by moving around and getting your body going, getting your blood pumping. I tell you that's something that I've learned from Tony Robbins. It's an extremely valuable tool. Make sure that you're leveraging it, but your state is so critical. So what I want to do right now is I want to get you into state. You're about to learn some amazing things from our guest speaker this evening. I want to make sure that you are taking the most out of it and retaining as much information as you can. So what I want you to do is I want you to stand up, and I want you to shake it out. I want you to shimmy loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, scream at the top of your lungs. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You got nothing to lose. I don't care who's looking at you weirdly, if you're at work or if you're in an office or if you're at home. I don't care what's going on. You've got nothing to lose, because at the end of the day, it's about how much are you taking from this program. If you're making the most out of this, you've invested yourself in this program. I want you to make the most out of this. So get yourself into a state conducive for being successful. This goes for any scenario you're going into at work, whether that be a mentor meeting, a colleague meeting, a supervisor meeting. Get yourself into state. Do what you need to do to get yourself prepared physically, because you will then be much more likely to be successful. Now, the next key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you are going to be or not to be successful? I want to think about this in a different way. I want to ask you a question. I would love if you could post your comments in the comments section. But what is a feeling that you want other people to feel about you when you meet them? The reason why I ask this is because it helps us and forces us to be intentional about how we want others to feel about us. Because ultimately, if we're intentional intentional about how we want other people to feel about us, we are much more likely to actually convey that feeling in them. If we're thinking to ourselves, man, I would love if people thought I was confident, or I would love if people thought I was knowledgeable, or I would love if people thought I was kind or empathetic, whatever it is, post in the comments section. I'd love to learn what is a feeling that you would love to convey in other people. But what this does, by being intentional about what feeling we are trying to convey in other people, we can now start taking actions and start doing things that help reinforce that feeling in their minds about who we are, what we're doing. If we can be intentional about how we want other people to feel about us, we are much more likely to be successful. That plays directly into that story thing about why we'll be successful, because sometimes I think it might be easy to perceive, oh, story is just about being confident. You know, story is just about telling yourself why you're going to be successful. And it is, that's a big part of it. But the other big component to having a good story is understanding every component of how other people interact with you. So you don't want to come in bombastically overconfident and just not being humble. It's about being intentional about how you want other people to feel about you. If you can identify that feeling, post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. That will really help you in terms of having the right story. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things you are going to do to best prepare yourself for this circumstance? Now, our workshop tonight is about when is the right time to switch jobs. I'm a big proponent of SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. One thing that I would love for you to do, it's great to start a routine every month. Identify what is the strength of staying in my company, what is the weakness of staying in my company, what are the opportunities of moving to a different company, what is the threat of moving to a different company. Identify that. When the opportunities and the weaknesses are greater than the strengths and the threats, it is time to move. That helps you do a personal audit of where you were, where you are, and where you'd like to be. If you don't do that, it can be difficult to know when is the right time to switch. It can be easy to fall into a trap of just doing the same monotonous work day in and day out. By doing consistent SWOT analyses and by doing it monthly, you're much more likely to have a greater understanding of when the right time is to switch. Now, the last thing that I would love and really implore you to try is to share what you're learning about with somebody else. It could be another person in this program. It could be a friend. It could be a significant other. It could be anybody, a family member, whatever. Because what we've learned is that when people who participate in this program share something that they learned about this program with at least 20 other people, their likelihood of achieving their goals in this program increases incrementally. We hypothesize that a big reason for this is that they're teaching other people these skills that they're learning. And when we know that when you teach somebody else something else, it is much more likely to reinforce in your mind. Maybe it could also be the law of attraction. By sharing with other people the things that you're learning in this program, especially your goals, people are now thinking about you for those outcomes. Maybe they're thinking, you know what, Jane Doe, John Doe would be a perfect fit for this thing, and they're going to introduce you. The point I'm making is that when you share this program and what you're learning with more people, the likelihood that you're going to achieve your goals increases substantially. And also, I mean, for future programs, we're actually we're opening up our enrollment for the fall program. If you could encourage other people to participate, we would love to get more people involved, because we know that if you could be an ambassador for this, we are much more likely to make a better impact and a bigger impact on more people. So if you could help encourage more people to enroll in the program, we would love to have that, especially to have your support in that endeavor. So I'm so excited to jump into our guest speaker this evening. We're talking about when is the right time to switch jobs. If you've got any questions about anything at all, any comments, any concerns, any issues with anything, please email us at support@ambition-in-motion.com. I'm so excited for what you all are about to learn this evening. I'm so excited for you to embark on the next half of the Ambition in Motion Mentor program with your mentor. I look forward to seeing what you are all able to accomplish. Let's get going to the next part of this workshop.
Hey everybody, welcome to our workshop. I am so excited to dive in. Our topic for today is when is the right time to switch jobs? How do we go about determining that? You know, sometimes we have scenarios where we think to ourselves, the grass is in fact greener on the other side. We must cut bait, jump ship, go to somewhere else. Sometimes we might think to ourselves like, oh, I know they're really, abusive or not that great, but, my boss said that he won't do it ever again, even though he said that multiple times before, and he keeps, throwing on tasks onto my list that just I don't have any control over and I can't possibly get done. And it's really stressful, or he's asked me to work on weekends and nights and mornings, and I'm working 100 hours a week, but he said eventually it'll cool down, and I'm holding out hope that it will. And somewhere in the middle, we more than likely fall. How do we go about determining when is the right time to, in fact, switch jobs? Fortunately, we got a great guest speaker with us here today to talk about this topic. We've got Stephanie Wedryk. Stephanie, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is an exciting topic to talk about, and hopefully I can share some wisdom with everybody.
So, Stephanie, high level, could you just share with us a little bit about your career path, how you got into your career path, kind of, just your stages from like college to early career to where you're at today? Just give us a little insight as to how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, sure. So I work in the agricultural field. I've been in this industry for the past 12 years now. I did not grow up on a farm. I grew up near Chicago, so it was not quite a logical or straight path for me to find this field. I had always been interested in plants, and when I was trying to decide what I wanted to major in college, my parents said, well, you better major in something practical, and that's the sciences or business. And I said, okay, science it is. Let's go into biology. And so I took every sort of plant science course I could, and I went to a small liberal arts school in Ohio called the College of Worcester. And in that town, the Ohio State University has a huge agricultural research facility. And I got connected with a professor there and did a senior research project with him. I had no plans as I was nearing graduation, and he said, well, just come be a student worker for the summer. And I said, okay, great, sounds like a plan. And then somewhere along the way, he had gotten a federal grant to do research. And he said, why don't you apply? And I thought, I have no plans, I think I will. And the timing couldn't have been better because it was 2007, so the Great Recession started, and I probably wasn't going to find a job anyway. So professional student was a good course for me. So I went and I got a PhD in horticulture and crop science from the Ohio State University, did a short postdoc, and then I found myself working for Winfield United, which is a division of Land O'Lakes, and moved to Minnesota. And so I got the initial position I worked with was really somebody to kind of be a translational point between technical and commercial. And I knew I had a knack there in being able to translate technical concepts. It wasn't the right role for me. I felt like I could do more and that I wanted to be challenged more. So another opportunity opened up, and I moved more into an R&D and data science role. Did that for about 4 years. And then I moved on to a startup in the cannabis space, moved to Colorado, and I built out an R&D program for them and built out product pipelines. And then things changed, and I moved to another startup in the biotechnology space, and was again able to work with them really in that inflection point between the technical and the commercial. And that's kind of where I've staked my career, is being that middle person, because I can speak both languages and sort of understand the needs of both sides. I moved on from them to my current role, and again, kind of in that sweet spot of technical and commercial. However, I am leaving this role at the end of this week, so this topic of how to, when do you know it's time to move on to a new job, looking for a new job, couldn't have been more timely because I just went through it, and excited to start my next role here in a couple weeks.
Gotta love when the timing works out perfectly, because this is an awkward conversation. It's hard to have. I know that when we've had this discussion with other panelists or guest speakers before, we discuss, when is the right time to switch jobs? And if they were in a scenario where they were contemplating switching jobs, but they hadn't officially made it official yet, they, were a little bit touch and go about it. So the fact that you're right, quite literally in that inflection point, could not be a better scenario. Have you ever had a job that you hated, or I guess this is a two-part question, a two-parter. One, have you ever been in a job that you hated, you knew you needed to leave, but you didn't have the next step planned out, so you stayed maybe for a little longer? Vice versa, have you ever had a scenario when you've switched jobs, got into a new job, when you were like, ruh-roh, this is not what I was thinking it would be, and you immediately regretted taking that new job? How do you handle your assessment of whether or not this next position was a good choice or not?
Yeah, so I have the tendency to do the first thing and overstay my welcome, I'll call it. where I tend to hold on to the job long past its expiration date. And for me, I will try every single avenue to make the job work for me. And, you know, I've been in situations where the job was no longer challenging to me and I wanted something else, and I just couldn't seem to make that work out, where I had new types of projects or was working with new groups within the company. I've had situations where it was very clear that there were some pretty there were some struggles and some sort of, I would call it more people situations going on that I remained optimistic would get resolved, and they really never truly did. So ended up having to leave because it just wasn't working for me on a personal level anymore.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because I think that's a
Yeah.
really important part of the whole kind of like, when do I leave, when do I not leave dynamic. That's the relationship with the boss. And really, or just like the relationship with the leadership team in general. I feel like sometimes when there are clear glaring issues, and it sounds like in your case, you make it known. You're like, hey, very transparent. This is not okay. We need to do something to adjust this or fix this. And then sometimes it seems like, based on what you're describing, maybe you're getting a little gaslit, where like they're like, oh yeah, we'll change it. We'll change it for sure after this and this. But once we're done with this and this, totally, that'll be the number one thing on the docket. And then it just like doesn't happen. And you know, some other priority comes into the fold, and you're the thing you brought up just keeps getting pushed down and down and down. And how do you go about like stressing the seriousness of this challenge, and really also stressing the seriousness of like its need to get done to your boss? And have you ever had a boss that totally complied and was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea, I hear you and I'm going to make that change?
Yes. So I will say that some of the situations I've been in where where I've had to have conversations with my boss about what was happening. There was one situation where he was incredibly supportive and really tried to help me out. But what ended up happening was his mind shift over time kind of changed, and his priorities changed, and his relationship with the business changed. So his support of me in trying to work through it changed because of external circumstances. And, you know, when those external circumstances shifted, he didn't try to pretend anymore. Like, he didn't give it lip service or gaslight or do anything like that. He was pretty straightforward about it the entire time.
Pretty good. I mean, at least like, would you prefer? I feel like I prefer to get it the straight, honest truth of like, hey, I can't prioritize this because like there's this, the board's come at me and told me I needed to do this, or my boss has come to me and told me I needed to do that, and just like I don't have the time or bandwidth to take care of this, and I'm sorry. Like, I think that transparency is probably better than the, oh yeah, for sure, we'll make it happen. Like sometime over the next 5 to 10 years, it'll definitely be done.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what, I haven't had I've had that situation occur once.
Okay.
And it got to a place where I realized it wasn't going to happen. Initially, you know, I was told, oh, this will happen kind of in the first year. And then when it became apparent that it wasn't happening, you know, I knew it was time to go. And it wasn't just that singular factor. It's, for me, in switching jobs, it's usually a multiplicity of factors that align and say, this isn't right. And for me, it's always been about knowing what is most important to me. So I'm a very career-oriented person. So when the trajectory of what I'm doing really is not in line with my career anymore, that's when, for me, it's a stronger motivation than, let's say, the company it goes from, you know, selling cars to selling toilets, right? Like, for me, that's less important. Or the job duties matter too, but to me, it's all about what is fitting the career, right? If they tell me, you know, you got to go scrub toilets for a while because the janitor just quit, okay, cool, I can do it temporarily. But again, if the job duties align with my career goals, I'm good. If they don't, that's where I start to struggle a little bit.
Interesting. So I'd love to take the moment to ask the students a question. Post in the comment section. Have you ever faced a scenario where you faced a frustrating scenario at work, and how'd you handle it? Did you quit? Did you broach your boss about it? If you broach your boss about it, what did your boss say? Like, I'd be very curious to learn your scenario about that. But Stephanie, you bring up a really interesting point. Like, I think a lot of college students, when they're going through their collegiate career path of like, do I go into marketing, or do I go into biology, or do I go into finance, or do I go into accounting, or do I go into psychology, or whatever path that they're laying out from a collegiate standpoint. I think it's easy to fall into the assumption that career paths are linear, where it's like, oh, I'm a marketing person. I'm a marketing major. I'll become a marketing blah, blah, blah in career or whatever, but that's not how it works. It's typically up, down, all around. And you brought up a really, really good point about, if the main core elements of my job duties align with what you're actually asking me to do, then we're good. It just, you like, kind of like with job description, your promise to me was this job description. My promise to you was that I would fulfill this job description. I'm a team player. I'm willing to take on additional things if they are necessary and temporary. But like, don't bring me into a job that says I'm going to do this to then bait and switch me to work on something else. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah. Um, I would also say that I want to be continuously challenged, and that it can be difficult at times. That a job will hire you and say these three things are your main responsibility, and maybe it's something. For me, I've had situations where I've already mastered those three things, and I want to make sure to be able to do other things, or maybe they're very quickly mastered, that within a year or two you feel like, I've got this. There's really nothing else I can learn. I want to try something else. And some organizations are very open to that, and some are not. And some managers are very good at finding their team new opportunities, and some are not. And so being able to have an alignment there between really the manager being able to find new opportunities, the company being open to that, as well as your own sort of fortitude and your own kind of opportunistic view of how to get into certain things, right? I think that that's pretty critical, because a lot of times in jobs, people aren't going to just hand it to you. I saw an opportunity recently in my current role where there was a gap in marketing where I saw where they could need some assistance. So I stepped in and took on a lot of marketing load for a while. And for me, I wanted to do that to be able to gain more experience in that area. So it fit.
So let's talk about that for a second. I'm curious to learn. I guess I've heard in other past interviews before on this topic where someone said, hey, when I get into a job and I feel overwhelmed, it's like, cool, I know I'm in a good spot. I'm overwhelmed. I'm drinking from the fire hose and I'm learning. And then they say, I get to a point where like, I feel like I'm finally seeing above water and things are good. Like, I'm not like disengaged. I'm not like, I feel like it's good, but I feel like I finally got a grasp at it. And then you get to the boredom phase where it's like, cool, I got this. I can do this in my sleep. I got it. Who does it fall on? Is it fall on the manager to know when you're at the boredom phase, or is it on the individual to say, I'm at the boredom phase, can we try to find something more engaging for me? Like, how do you go about having that conversation with your company to say like, hey, I hit the competency life cycle? I don't know if that's actually the term for it, but I feel like that sounds right. But
I love that term. Let's roll with it.
yeah, so let's call it the competency lifestyle, where it's like, I feel totally incompetent. I'm drinking from a fire hose. It's like, I am appropriately competent. I feel pretty good. And then like, yeah, I'm bored. Whose role is it to tell the company that you're bored? And then like, how do you go about, what do you think the ideal scenarios? And then what is oftentimes the scenario that happens?
So I feel as though it's incumbent upon that individual to say, I'm bored, I need more challenges. And I think that maybe sometimes people expect their managers to know, but having been in individual contributor roles, manager roles, and up the chain, the more up the chain you get, the more things you're getting thrown at you. And so it's often noticing those kinds of things is not always the forte of somebody in management. So I think it's incumbent upon that person. And but to me, once they open their mouth that I'm bored, I want new challenges, it is now partially the onus of that manager to say, okay, let me help you. And to try to find things. And I think but that person is not absolved at that point. They have to continue to work with their manager and say, here's maybe the types of things I'm interested in. Or, I was talking to so-and-so on this team and they got this big project. I think maybe I could help. Could you help me get in there, right? I think at that point, they have to go back and forth to figure out what a good scenario would look like.
You mentioned earlier that you sometimes overstay your welcome. How do you know when it's the right time to persevere versus cut bait?
So this is what I'm still currently learning because for me, again, I'm fairly opportunistic and I'm pretty good at getting out there and trying things outside of my role and putting myself out there. And once I realize these are all dead ending, they're not going anywhere, nothing's happening. That's when I'm like, it might be time to go.
Well, hold on a second. How do you determine when they're dead ending?
When I can see that
give an example, tell a story.
Yeah. Okay, so I was in a role where I'd gotten bored and I wanted new career challenges, and I'm thinking, what's my next step in my career? I don't want to do this job for the next 10, 20 years. And so I started talking to other business units to see maybe I could transfer business units and do a similar type of role there to expand my horizons. And those other people in those business units were like, no, you have to go get a whole new PhD and go to school for however long and have all these years of experience here. And you'd have to take a massive demotion and pay cut to even be part of this business unit. And I was like, okay, that's a dead end. That's pretty obviously a dead end. And then when I was trying to get involved in new types of projects, but all they were asking of me was a very specific skill set that I had gotten bored in doing, that I had done over and over and over again. And I was looking more for, can I lead this project? Can I be in a different part of this project, right? Not just this one specific skill set, but a different skill set. And when I kind of kept getting told no, I knew there was a dead end. And then when my manager also was trying to get me involved in another project, and I remember asking him, I said, well, what would my role be? And he goes, well, it would just be this one specific skill set. And I was kind of like, I'm trying to get out of that skill set. So when that kept happening over and over again, I knew it was time.
Out of curiosity, did it have to do like SQL analytics or like database, like digestion or something like that?
It was data related, yes.
I knew it. It's so funny you say that because like you're not the first person. I can guess that because I've got a lot of people that I know where I've heard the exact same scenario where they're like, I'm ready to take on the next level. And they're like, great, you can jump this team. Like, great, what do you want me to do? Run my SQL queries and understand the data and send me reports back with what this data means. So like, cool. That's what I was doing that. But what else can I do with the data? Give me what you think might be going on here, but honestly, don't go too in depth because really all I need is the data.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like that's something that, it's like these senior leaders don't know how to run SQL queries and don't know how to digest data. So they just need someone to give them the data so then they can like make decisions based off of it. But, yeah, I think that there's a major lack in like empathetic leadership within that of just trusting your team to say like, hey, if I'm going to ask you to digest the data, I want you to also come to me with what these implications could be and then help with strategic decision making from there. I think that makes it a whole lot more interesting and entertaining because you're like, cool, there are implications here and I could potentially set the path of where this business is going moving forward.
Absolutely. And that's something that's always been really important to me when I've managed people is to make sure to understand their opinion on things. Particularly if they're the one looking at data or looking at a trial or whatever it may be. I think their opinion is pretty critical in those types of decisions.
Yeah, let me take a moment to ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comments section. how have you gone about asking for additional responsibilities at your work? Post in the comments section. I'd be very curious to learn how you've gone about asking for additional responsibilities from your boss or your manager. And I'd be curious to know, did it work? Did it not work? Post in the comment section. So, Stephanie, you mentioned that you're transitioning roles. I think that's super exciting. How do you go about in the interview process identifying whether or not a company's a fit for you? I think all of us want to avoid scenarios where we're taking. I don't think anybody goes into a job with the anticipation that's going to be a bad job or it's not going to work out for them. I think we all come in with the best of intentions, like, hey, this company's going to work out for me. I updated my LinkedIn profile. I got a bunch of congratulations. I'm really excited. They're really excited. Everyone's really excited. Is there a way we can suss that out to better understand, is this company going to, in fact, be what I'm looking for or not what I'm looking for? And how can we go about like creating a scenario where we're more educated? Because they're also evaluating us too. Like what we proposed in the interview process was we would be a good fit for their company based on whatever criteria they're looking for as well. So how do we go about assessing that out? Is there a way to assess that out in the interview process?
There's things that can help, but I think it's difficult to fully understand, unfortunately, until you're ingrained, right? Actually had an interview recently with somebody, and I was asking about company culture, and they said, well, culture is defined as the way we work. And I thought, yes, that is kind of how it is. That's how a company works together, is kind of this culture. And so that's something I think about. And I think asking that question is, how do people work together? And can be pretty critical in sussing it out. And a couple of things I like to do is, you got to research your company. And based on size, there's a few traits that seem to follow companies based on their size. I've been in startups and I've been in very large companies. And, the very large companies in general are very slow to move and adapt. And it's going to be more structured and process heavy in general. Startups, there may be a lot of opportunities to try different things, but things are going to move quickly. And you're going to be asked to do a lot of different things, and they could bounce between ideas a lot, right? One minute their strategy is to go, build out all this intellectual property, and the next minute they want to be a manufacturing company. And that's how startups are. So I think understanding how you operate and what is important to you will understand, will I fit well in small, medium, or large? There are some questions I always ask, because cultural fit is huge for me. I've definitely had culture be a big reason why I've left other jobs. One question I ask, who do you want working for you in this company? Especially if you're talking to upper management, they're probably going to have a clear sense. They're going to tell you, I want somebody who's very technical, or I want somebody who's, is a utility player, or whatever it may be. And then I always say, how would you describe the core ethos of the company? And so some companies are very research focused, and understand that if you're in a research focused, things could be very disciplined, very structured, and that the research is going to dictate a lot of what happens in other areas. So maybe, some other area of the company is going to be shorted on budget because research matters more. And I think in most interviews, you get an opportunity to talk to somebody in upper management. And to me, those are some of the most critical interviews, because teams tend to take on the personality of their leader. And so, for example, if the leader seems highly organized, maybe very type A, you're going to be in a very structured team. And, you'd better have meeting agendas, and you'd better be on time, and things are going to go a very specific way. And if you're more fluid person, that may not work. I think listening is pretty critical as well. People, and I'm guilty of this too, we often make tangential comments when we're talking. And sometimes those tangential comments are some of the most revealing ones ever. I was in an interview once. I was interviewing for a vice president role that was going to report into a COO. I'm in the interview with the COO and the CEO. And the COO makes the comment, well, the CEO asked me to ask all these questions. And it was like, wait a minute, you can't decide what questions your own questions to ask in an interview? You're the COO. And that was very telling to me of what that culture was going to be in that company. And I was like, ooh, that's not going to work for me. So
Very
I think
micromanagement.
listening to those types of comments, one thing I have a tendency to not do is look at Glassdoor reviews or Indeed reviews or whatever, because I find that oftentimes when people are leaving those reviews is because they're upset about a situation at that company. And so that's what you're going to have a tendency to hear about, is just a bad situation that was their spark to quit. So I think you can actually find out more a lot of times just by asking the right questions during interviews.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think that's really interesting. Man, you brought up so many good. One, I think the question of what exactly are you looking for in a candidate for this position? I think if you're watching this and you're ever considering interviewing for a role, if you're currently interviewing, write it down. If you're thinking you will interview in the future, which I think should be everybody watching this, write that question down, because the reason why that question is so powerful is by asking the question, you're actually, it's a weird psychological trick, but you are conveying to the interviewer that you have the characteristics that they're looking for in the position itself because you asked the question. By just merely asking the question, you show a competent level of question asking that they feel comfortable that you possess the skills that they're about to share with you, even though you've not maybe said anything aligned with that, but because you asked for it, it's a huge differentiator. And then the second thing that you brought up, which I thought was so powerful, was listening to the responses, listening to like things that people say, and then listening to like the type of ethos that company has. And then really, I think even before going into the interviewing, understanding what your ethos is about work and how you view work, because I think so often people try to like took a round peg and put it into a square hole where it just doesn't fit, doesn't make any sense. It's just like, you wouldn't have been a fit here, but you did a good enough job in the interview process to sell yourself. And you're like, I need money, so please give me a job. So like you take it, but it's not a fit for anybody. It's not a fit for the company. It's not a fit for you. No one's going to work out. It's really hard. So I think you bring up a really good point about asking just for the ethos. And I think that's something that everyone should really take to the bank of, how do I go about evaluating and analyzing if a company is the right fit for me? What if you don't have a good boss? What if your relationship with you, like, what if you're like, okay, the company, amazing. My boss sucks. And you maybe are I know you're career oriented. Maybe you're really career oriented and your boss is kind of like I think bosses can suck in a variety of ways. Bosses can suck because they don't give you enough feedback. Bosses can suck because their work orientation doesn't align to yours. So like if you're really career oriented and your boss is like, I'm job oriented, I'm very much like steady Eddie, I don't need to work up to the next level. It's like, well, crap, I'm trying to work up to the next level. How the heck am I supposed to leapfrog you to get to the next level? I'm riding oftentimes people ride their boss's coattails. If they're a high flyer, they're going to bring with them everybody else that they trust and have reported to them up the ladder with them. And so if you got a boss that's like, I'm just kind of sitting and chilling, that can be frustrating. Or you can have a boss that is a micromanager and, clips your wings and does all your work for you or tells you exactly how to do your work, but doesn't give you an opportunity to do that. Those are a few different examples, but like, how can you go from taking a scenario where your boss sucks, but the company's amazing, and get out of that situation?
Realizing the boss is not your end all be all. Unless it's just you and the boss in the company, the two of you, there are likely other people to be able to work with. And I had a boss where we got along okay, but I don't know. There was something like this wall I just couldn't bust through. And I said, you know what? He's never going to be my best friend. I'm never going to be like this with him. But what I'm going to do is there's two other people on my team who report into him who I do get along with really well. And the relationship is smooth. I'm going to focus on those two. And those two can partially advocate for me to my boss, because I know there was a situation where one of them did. And they can also help to pull me in maybe other career development directions if that's what I'm looking for, help to give me maybe some additional feedback, because peer-to-peer feedback is super helpful as well. And so I think that's something critical I've done a lot in my career is make sure that I'm talking to other people at my boss's level or on my team who report into that boss to get other perspectives and guidance and to get where I want to go.
How do you do that without feeling like that seems like a very interesting position to be in, where like you're like, hey, I don't get along with our boss, but would you mind advocating for me? I mean, I feel like if you were to ask someone to do that, that's like such a one, that's a cool ask to make, because I don't think anyone would tell you no if you got a good rapport with them, because then they're like, yeah, of course, like you're awesome. I really enjoy working with you. Um, but still, I feel like I don't know, that still seems interesting. Like, how did that go? Like, what did it work? I'd be curious. Like, I haven't heard that concept before. I like it. I always think the concept of asking people for help is always a good thing. I think not enough people ask for help. But in this scenario, that's a fascinating to go to a peer, say, hey, I don't know if I'm getting through to our boss, but it seems like you are. Do you mind maybe kind of spotlighting me a little bit?
Directly asked. They just volunteered to advocate for me on one thing.
That's cool.
And so one thing I've always I've made a habit for many years in my career is if I have an idea or a position, I talk to multiple people about it and get their feedback. And I kind of mold my position, but I also understand that if that topic of conversation comes up in a meeting, I've already had that conversation one-on-one with somebody else, that there's a greater likelihood they may say, Stephanie and I talked about this, and we kind of came to this conclusion or that conclusion, right? And so it's a little bit of politicking, but I'm more viewing this in terms of not putting all my stock in the relationship with my boss, because there's so many other important relationships that can help you out in a company besides your boss. I remember there was one relationship I built with somebody who was in marketing when I was more in a technical role, and that was a pretty critical relationship for me. And he supported me, and when he found out I was leaving, he was upset. So I think it's really critical to understand what the nature of the relationship with your boss is going to be. I've had it too where I've been their number two, right? Like we're like this. So I think it's critical, understand what it is and do the best you can with what it is, but there's other key relationships to have in an organization as well.
Nice. I love that. Let me ask the students a question real quick. How have you, or if you haven't done this before, how will you go about building bonds outside of just your relationship with your boss? Post in the comments section. I'd love to learn more about how have you built bonds with people outside of your boss that allowed you to advocate, not just like friend relationship where you maybe go out for, a beverage or to like hang out periodically outside of work. I'm talking about like from a professional standpoint, leverage peers and colleagues and coworkers to build deeper bonds and work your way up the organization and truly like network within an organization beyond just your relationship with your boss. Post in the comment section if you've done it before. If you've not done it before, how would you like to be doing that? Post in the comment section. I'd be curious to learn. So Stephanie, this has been an awesome workshop. I feel like we've covered some really great points of just how do we go about determining when is the right time to switch jobs? Are there any final like notions or insights that you'd like to share with our audience before we sign off?
It also comes down to just intuition. I think if you trust yourself, when it's time to go, and talk to people in your network, right? In my recent decision to transition out of my role, I talked to my spouse frequently about it, and he would look at me and go, yeah, really encourage me to say, okay, yeah, I think you should take that other offer, right? And was able to look at it more objectively, because oftentimes our emotions get wrapped up in our work. It's hard not to. We spend eight or more hours a day in it. It's hard not to have feelings about it. And so I think being able to bounce things off your network and just know, yeah, it's time. It's time. And to be able to look back at each job and know that there were lessons learned for the journey and lessons learned for the career, or maybe it was just, I made a couple really good friends in that job. great. And maybe that's what you got from it, and that's okay too.
And I think you have a good self-awareness where you've even identified that like you sometimes stay in a job for a little bit longer than maybe you should have. So I think as students, like if you're observing this, if you do know this about yourself, that's awesome. If you don't know this about yourself, ideally you can learn this about yourself. But the idea is that, you know, for someone like Stephanie, if you know that you hang on for a little bit longer, maybe that's an indicator that the moment you kind of get that intuition, that gut feeling, like, I don't know if this is the right spot, maybe you need to pull that trigger a little bit sooner than you have in the past, only because like you know this about yourself. You tend to stay on a lot longer. Now there are some people who cut bait a little too early, where like the moment any adversity comes their way, they're like, I'm out of here, I'm done. It's like, well, hold on a second. You might want to stick around for a little while. There might be something else here that you may not have realized in the first place. And so I think learning that about oneself is really critical as a barometer for when to stay or when to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, the more and more I progress in my career, I realize that the career journey is really, if you want it to be, just a journey of self-knowledge, self-discovery, and development. You know, if you want to take it in that road. You know, some people are very happy just going to work, they get the paycheck, and that's it. And that's cool too. Nothing wrong with that. But I think there's so much that can be learned about self in a career if we're open to it.
I love it. Well, Stephanie, thanks for your time. Students, thank you all for your
Yes.
time. I really appreciate you all being here for this workshop. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you in our next workshop.